Today is race day in China, and this is the second race of the Formula One season in 2026. And this is taking place today on a Sunday at Shanghai International Circuit. And it's going to be a very interesting race, being actually a sprint race weekend in China. And having seen the performance of the teams during the sprint race, then maybe there is expectation that that will almost be the same during the full race. And more importantly, it will be very interesting to see how Mercedes, Ferrari, and McLaren are going to perform, given that they are the three teams that seems to be in front of the grid at the moment. Of course, Mercedes are way ahead of the rest, with Ferrari showing signs of actually keeping pace with them, and McLaren have shown signs of making a step forward this weekend, which means that if they get everything right, they might start getting involved with at least the two teams that are in front. But at least given how the teams qualified yesterday, then this makes the race in China a very promising kind of a race. You have Kimi on pole, followed by George in P2, and then Hamilton in P3, Leclerc in P4. And that already makes the start of the race a very interesting scenario. Something that you should actually look forward to, or something that I'm actually looking forward to, because Ferrari have actually shown that they can be able to start very well and quickly take the lead of the race. And so it will be very interesting to see who will be taking the lead by the end of turn one, or at least by the end of the first lap. And that's just part of, this particular race, which is, exciting. Because if you have that kind of a back and forth, or what people are calling yo-yo racing, then at least you can say that the first few laps are going to be very interesting before everything settles in. But of course, the race in China is not only limited to the front three teams. You also have a lot of activities that is taking place during or in the midfield, especially when you consider you have, teams like Red Bull and particularly Max Verstappen in the mix of all that. And that's because Red Bull are still struggling at this particular moment. I think they haven't gotten their package in the right window, although many are arguing that it is not actually an engine issue. It's probably other issues that are still limiting them to be able to then make a step forward. But at least having Red Bull in that mix makes it interesting, because then they'll be competing with the rest of the midfield, teams like Haas. You have other teams that are also making very good moves in the midfield. Racing Bulls is one of them. So it is going to be also very interesting to not only watch what is going on at the front of the grid, but also keep a tab on what is going on in the midfield. And of course, you cannot also forget, the teams that are on the back of the field or the back of the grid. If this is the first time that you and I are meeting, I am Joe, and on this YouTube channel, I talk about Formula One and the business of Formula One. And I would really appreciate it if you'd consider subscribing to this YouTube channel. And while it is not fun to probably see some of those teams there, and maybe you might be disappointed if you support any of them, if you support Aston Martin, if you support Williams, if you support, specific drivers. Like Fernando Alonso, you may not be very excited to see them, fighting at the back of the grid. At least for Cadillac, being their first time in Formula One, you can probably forgive them and give them some grace that, they are still running the ropes. But I think for the rest, it's a little bit disappointing, especially given how much hope people had, for example, with Aston Martin. And also given how Williams were also promising towards the end of the 2025 season. So to see those two teams at the back of the grid is not very exciting, but at least it is what it is. And it is the hope of the many that as the season evolves, as the season progresses, those teams will also be making a step forward and hoping that maybe by the time we get to June, July, and August, maybe they'll have sorted out any issues that they may be having at this particular moment. Because again, we are still in early days, Chinese Grand Prix being just the second race of this entire season. There is Japan, which is upcoming, and then the entire of April where there will be no races because the Bahrain Grand Prix and the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix have been cancelled due to the ongoing crisis in Middle East. The Chinese Grand Prix is taking place at a time when, the championships are starting to take shape. When you look at the Drivers' Championship, George Russell is actually the champion leader at this particular moment. And so he'll be looking forward to actually getting the maximum points that he can get from this particular race so that he can still remain ahead. And of course, you have Kimi Antonelli, who starts on pole today, and he is P2 in championship, and will also be looking at an opportunity to actually secure more points. The Ferrari team of Hamilton and Leclerc, who are also sitting in third and fourth in the championship, will also be looking forward to ensure that they get the best results that they can get in this particular race. And this too applies to the Constructors' Championship. Going into China, you have Mercedes, who are actually leading the championship, with the Ferrari following behind them. So it will also be very interesting to see how the teams actually score, because that will also play a role in ensuring that they can get as much points as is possible. Of course, the other teams are also in need to secure points, because at the end of the day, you have both the Constructors and the Drivers' Championship running concurrently. One of the things that I am wondering about or thinking about as we head into the Chinese Grand Prix today is who will be leading by the end of turn 1, or at least by the end of lap 1. And the only reason why this is something that maybe one can think about in 2026 is because at least it has become clear coming from Australia and also during the sprint race in China that Ferrari seems to have a thing of being able to actually start well and take the lead either during lap 1 or at least by the end of turn 1. Charles Leclerc did it in Australia, and Lewis Hamilton did it during the sprint race in China. And that's why maybe one can then ask who will be the person leading the race or leading turn 1 during the Chinese Grand Prix. This is going to be it from me at this particular moment, and I'm looking forward to the Chinese Grand Prix. Subscribe to this YouTube channel if you have not, and I'm going to see you in my next video.